not stand. While in Austin, Texas tonight, George W. Bush prepares his own speech to the nation, scheduled for 1 hour from now. In a special report tonight, we'll examine the many challenges before America as the presidency changes hands. Now, from the old Executive Office building in Washington next to the White House, here is the Vice President of the United States.
Good evening. Just moments ago, I spoke with George W. Bush and congratulated him on becoming the 43rd President of the United States. And I promised him that I wouldn't call him back this time. I offered to meet with him as soon as possible so that we can start to heal the divisions of the campaign and the contest through which we've just passed. Almost a century and a half ago, Senator Stephen Douglas told Abraham Lincoln, who had just defeated him for the presidency, "Partisan feeling must yield to patriotism." I'm with you, Mr. President, and God bless you. Well, in that same spirit, I say to President-elect Bush that what remains of partisan rancor must now be put aside, and may God bless his stewardship of this country. Neither he nor I anticipated this long and difficult road. Certainly neither of us wanted it to happen. Yet it came, and now it has ended, resolved as it must be resolved through the honored institutions of our democracy. Over the library of one of our great law schools is inscribed the motto, "Not under man, but under God and law." That's the ruling principle of American freedom, the source of our democratic liberties. I've tried to make it my guide throughout this contest, as it has guided America's deliberations of all the complex issues of the past 5 weeks. Now the U.S. Supreme Court has spoken. Let there be no doubt, while I strongly disagree with the court's decision, I accept it. I accept the finality of this outcome, which will be ratified next Monday in the Electoral College. And tonight, for the sake of our unity as a people and the strength of our democracy, I offer my concession. I also accept my responsibility, which I will discharge unconditionally, to honor the new president-elect and do everything possible to help him bring Americans together in fulfillment of the great vision that our Declaration of Independence defines and that our Constitution affirms and defends. Let me say how grateful I am to all those who supported me and supported the cause for which we have fought. Tipper and I feel a deep gratitude to Joe and Hadassah Lieberman, who brought passion and high purpose to our partnership and opened new doors, not just for our campaign, but for our country. This has been an extraordinary election, but in one of God's unforeseen paths, this belatedly broken impasse can point us all to a new common ground, for its very closeness can serve to remind us that we are one people with a shared history and a shared destiny. Indeed, that history gives us many examples of contests as hotly debated, as fiercely fought, with their own challenges to the popular will. Other disputes have dragged on for weeks before reaching resolution. And each time, both the victor and the vanquished have accepted the result peacefully and in a spirit of reconciliation. So let it be with us. I know that many of my supporters are disappointed. I am too. But our disappointment must be overcome by our love of country. And I say to our fellow members of the world community, let no one see this contest as a sign of American weakness. The strength of American democracy is shown most clearly through the difficulties it can overcome. Some have expressed concern that the unusual nature of this election might hamper the next president in the conduct of his office. I do not believe it need be so. President-elect Bush inherits a nation whose citizens will be ready to assist him in the conduct of his large responsibilities. I personally will be at his disposal, and I call on all Americans. I particularly urge all who stood with us to unite behind our next president. This is America. Just as we fight hard when the stakes are high, we close ranks and come together when the contest is done. And while there will be time enough to debate our continuing differences, now is the time to recognize that that which unites us is greater than that which divides us. While we yet hold and do not yield our opposing beliefs, there is a higher duty than the one we owe to political party. This is America, and we put country before party. We will stand together behind our new president. As for what I'll do next, I don't know the answer to that one yet. Like many of you, I'm looking forward to spending the holidays with family and old friends. I know I'll spend time in Tennessee and mend some fences, literally and figuratively. Some have asked whether I have any regrets, and I do have one regret, that I didn't get the chance to stay and fight for the American people over the next 4 years, especially for those who need burdens lifted and barriers removed, especially for those who feel their voices have not been heard. I heard you, and I will not forget. I've seen America in this campaign, and I like what I see. It's worth fighting for, and that's a fight I'll never stop. As for the battle that ends tonight, I do believe, as my father once said, that no matter how hard the loss, defeat may serve as well as victory to shake the soul and let the glory out. So for me, this campaign ends as it began, with the love of Tipper and our family, with faith in God and in the country I have been so proud to serve, from Vietnam to the vice presidency, and with gratitude to our truly tireless campaign staff and volunteers, including all those who worked so hard in Florida for the last 36 days. Now the political struggle is over, and we turn again to the unending struggle for the common good of all Americans and for those multitudes around the world who look to us for leadership in the cause of freedom. In the words of our great hymn, America, America, let us crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. And now, my friends, in a phrase I once addressed to others, it's time for me to go. Thank you, and good night, and God bless America.
Vice President Al Gore, flanked by his family and his friend and running mate, Joe Lieberman, who was the vice presidential candidate, the first Jewish American to occupy such a high station in American political life, and his wife Hadassah, in what can only be described as a graceful speech of reconciliation from the old Executive Office Building, which is right next door to the White House in Washington, D.C. It could not have been an easy task for this very competitive man who has spent most of his adult life in politics. It was the great dream of his late father, the Senator Albert Gore from Tennessee, that his son would be the President of the United States one day, and perhaps he will be one day. He said that which divides us, that which unites us, must be greater than that which divides us. And he called on those people who supported him during this campaign to back Texas Governor George W. Bush, who will be the 43rd President of the United States. He also said at the outset, of course, that he had made that telephone call to the governor in Austin, and this time he said he would not be calling back. You'll recall on election morning, very early, there were those two calls, first conceding and then saying, well, just a moment, it does look like it could be close in Florida, and indeed it was. It took more than a month to sort all that out. Let's go to NBC's Tim Russert now, our Washington bureau chief and moderator of Meet the Press. Tim, it would be hard to improve on that as a statement of reconciliation and support for the new president.
Well, that was the perfect tone, Tom. It was personal and poignant and credible. The vice president said he disagreed with the Supreme Court decision. He's disappointed about losing. He said he doesn't know what he's going to do now. But he was extremely gracious, and it was imperative that he step up and do just this, and he did it extremely well.
And it was also important for him to say to his supporters who are still out there, many of them probably angry about the U.S. Supreme Court, and the feeling that since he had won the popular vote, and many of them believe that he'd also won the vote in Florida, that somehow this had been taken away from him unfairly. There was none of that in his speech tonight.
Not at all. And in fact, he emphasized the notion that his real disappointment was he couldn't stay and fight, a campaign theme he used over and over again, which gives them hope that there may be another time, another campaign. But this was a big moment for Al Gore. He stepped up to it. I think he took a big step in helping unify the country, and I think he'll receive kudos from both Republicans and Democrats alike.
Tim, if you will stay just right there for a moment, we're going to go to NBC's Claire Shipman now, who does cover the Gore campaign, has been spending a lot of time watching this man from Tennessee who has been called derisively in the past Prince Albert, but he is a man of great ambition, and he has had a life dedicated to public service. Claire, do you think that he can walk away from all of this?
I think it's going to be very hard, Tom, and I think you could sense that tonight, and especially the bit you and Tim were just talking about in his speech, where his biggest regret is that he didn't get to stay and fight. I saw a sure hint there that he might like to come back and fight in 4 years. A couple things I thought were noteworthy. One, there was a lot of debate today about whether he would actually use the word concession, and he clearly did. But more, I thought that this was very much a speech crafted by Al Gore. He did write it. He spent a lot of time writing it, but it really reflected him. The bit of humor at the top, joking about that original concession call, the touch of personal sentiment about his own father, who went through a very difficult loss of his own, of his Senate seat. And again, the fierce side that we're also used to seeing, which is saying, I disagree with the Supreme Court, and I am disappointed. So it was, more than almost any other speech I've heard in the year and a half I've been covering him, a real reflection of the man who was running for this office. Tom?
Thank you very much, Claire Shipman. Final word from Tim Russert as we look from an analytical point of view about his place in the Democratic Party. A lot of Democrats tonight were not eager to appear on this program because within that party especially, they're wanting to take the measure of George W. Bush and trying to figure out just where they fit on the landscape. Do you think that they will welcome Al Gore back into the party ranks with open arms, Tim?
Tom, that's still a large uncertainty. If Al Gore had lost this campaign on election night, I think the chances of him being the nominee in 2004 were extremely remote. Now, because of this 35-day post period we've gone through, he is trying to emerge as the titular head of the Democratic Party, the shadow president, if you will, the potential nominee in 2004. And if he decides to run, others will challenge him, but they're going to have to take it away from him. Both Tom Daschle, leader of the Democrats in the Senate, and Dick Gephardt, leader of the Democrats in the House, have said he is the front runner in 2004 if he decides to run. One last point, I was quite taken by the fact that he congratulated on George W. Bush on becoming president, not being elected president. I think that's quite significant.
Thank you very much, NBC's Tim Russert. Someone who knows about making concession speeches during the course of this year. He gave a very vigorous challenge, obviously, to George W. Bush in the early going in the primaries. Senator John McCain of the state of Arizona. He joins us now. First of all, Senator McCain, these are tough speeches to make.
They're very tough, and I think I could relate a little bit to what the Vice President did tonight, and therefore I'm very appreciative of the way he handled it. He handled it with grace and style and a certain personableness that perhaps we didn't always see during the campaign. I have to give him very high marks, and I think this is the first step on a road to reconciliation and unification of the country, and he certainly did his part tonight.
Senator McCain, how much do you think this country has been wounded in a political sense by all that has gone on, not just in the past 36 days, but in the earlier parts of the campaign as well?
Not as much as we had feared, but a little more than we had hoped. There are areas where we have to work together. I hope that rather than being discouraged by this scenario that we've been through, maybe we should be encouraged to do the things that the American people want us to do, including, by the way, beginning with giving money and assistance to assure that all Americans, no matter how poor the area they come from, that their vote is freely and fairly counted, including both parties joining together and going on college campuses and getting people to vote. As President Clinton said, no American can ever say again that their vote didn't count. So therefore, that gives us a perfect opportunity to encourage participation, which, as you know, sadly has dropped off amongst young Americans.
Do you find great sentiment for that across the party lines in Washington?
I sense it with some, and I don't with others. The American people have to speak to their elected representatives. We don't want gridlock. We want you to reform the campaign finance system together, which I think, by the way, would be the first good manifestation of bipartisanship. We want you to reform Social Security. We want seniors to have prescription drugs. And why do you fight about it? Why can't you work together? If the elected representatives get that message, then I think that we will act. And again, the Vice President set a very excellent tone, which I'm sure will be followed up by the President-elect.
Senator McCain, I want to bring in one of your fellow senators. He happens to be from the other party. He's from the embattled state of Florida, and that is Senator Bob Graham, who joins us now. Senator Graham, your state has been put through the mill. Let's begin with this whole question about election law reform, uniform ballots, better machines, tighter laws. Do you think that that's going to happen in Florida and across the country in the next 4 years?
I do, Tom, and I think most of the work is going to be done at the state level. The states have the responsibility for organizing their elections. Several things we've learned as a result of this election. One is that the machinery that we're using is out of date, is inconsistent and unreliable. Second, we've probably put too much emphasis at the local level in Florida, at the county level, and therefore don't have the kind of uniformity of standards and processes that we need to have. There is going to be a role for the federal government. One of those roles is going to be to deal with an important part of the electorate, and that is our men and women overseas who vote by absentee. That was a major issue in Florida. The federal government also can play a role in terms of providing some funding to states and local communities to help meet what's going to be a very significant bill to pay for all this new technology.
Senator Graham, I want to put you up there side by side with Senator McCain. That is in a small way a reflection of where the United States Senate now is. It's 50-50. Senator McCain, you've said that you are willing to share power on your committees, but your leader, Senator Trent Lott, is not much interested in that. Are we going to get this worked out before January 20th?
I believe so. I believe that both Senator Daschle and Senator Lott want to work this out. Senator Hollings and I have worked closely together for many years. He doesn't want the chairmanship. He wants me to be the chairman, but he wants equal representation. They do have equal representation. Unfortunately, Bob Graham's party got 50 votes, 50 seats. I think that there's going to be a goodwill effort to work that out, and I think we will, and frankly must. Otherwise, we're not going to begin addressing the issues of the day.
And Senator Graham, when John McCain begins anew his crusade for campaign finance reform, will you be one of those standing beside him across party lines?
Absolutely. It's fundamental if we're going to begin the process of restoring people's confidence that the government belongs to them and not those who happen to have the largest campaign checks. I believe, as John said earlier, that the comments made by the Vice President tonight were a very gracious end of the campaign and hopefully commencement of a period of national unity and goodwill. I wish the Vice President and Senator Lieberman well. Congratulations for a hard-fought campaign and best wishes for a continued service to the people of America.
Senator McCain, have you had an opportunity to talk to Texas Governor George W. Bush in the last few days? And have there been any feelers from him or other members of his team about you joining the administration at a cabinet level?
No and no. I would also like to mention, you know, there is a good outcome. All of us on both sides of the aisle look forward to welcoming Joe Lieberman back to the Senate. He's a valued member.
But do you think it's going to be important for Governor Bush to have some Democrats or people from outside the inner circle of the Republican Party in his campaign to at least symbolically say to the country that I am interested in building new coalitions?
I do, and I also believe that Governor Bush would, exactly as he did as governor of the state of Texas, will reach across the aisle and work together with Democrats on issues that are important and have the Democrats help him set the agenda. And so I'm hopeful and optimistic.
Finally, Senator Graham, do you think that there will be a role for Al Gore in the future of the party, perhaps once again as a presidential candidate?
There will be a definite role for Al Gore in the future of America, whatever that role might be. He's a very able, dedicated person, experienced. He has a great deal that he has offered and that he will offer in the future. And I'd also like to share John Simon. Welcome back, Joe.
Thank you both very much. That's Senator Bob Graham of Florida and Senator John McCain of Arizona. Gentlemen, we're very happy that you're going to stick around because we are going to be hearing from Texas Governor George Bush tonight at 10 o'clock, and then we'll be getting your take on his speech tonight as well. Joe Lieberman, of course, ran simultaneously for the United States Senate and also for the vice presidency, and he will have a job. He doesn't have to worry about where he's going come January 20th. We'll be back with more of this special report on the challenges facing America right after this.
While I strongly disagree with the court's decision, I accept it Monday.
Now this is the fear snake, the most venomous snake in the world. One bite from him and it's all over. Yo! Ah! No worries, mate. Luckily, we've had the anti-venom sent from him.
Austin, Texas, and momentarily we do expect to hear from the President-elect of the United States, George W. Bush, the sitting governor of the state of Texas, which will very shortly have a new chief executive, of course, as George W. Bush becomes the 43rd president of the United States. About an hour ago, Vice President Al Gore formally conceded after making the call to the Texas governor. Let's go to NBC's Tim Russert now, who's our Washington bureau chief and moderator of Meet the Press. The assignment for the governor tonight as well, Tim, is pretty daunting. This is a kind of minor league State of the Union speech for him.
Absolutely, Tom. He has to step forward and say to the country, it is time to heal. How? By being bipartisan. His close advisors told me that he was quite taken by reading about Thomas Jefferson in 1800, when John Adams had a peaceful transformation, surrender of power, if you will, to a different party. And Jefferson stood before the country and said, we are all Republicans, we are all Federalists, the two major parties at the time. That's why it is very important that George W. Bush tonight is going to the Texas House of Representatives, controlled by the Democrats, being introduced by a Democrat. And his closest friend in state government was the late Lieutenant Governor Bob Bullock. George W. Bush tonight reaching out to both parties, Tom.
And Tim, it seems to me that he has no greater challenge once he gets to Washington than to not just reach out to Democrats, but he's going to have to find some kind of an accommodation with the Republican leadership in the Senate and the House as well. I'll ask you to keep your remarks brief here as we keep our eye on the chamber at the Texas Capitol, Tim.
With a 50-50 Senate and only 9-seat advantage in the House, there can be no far-right agenda. There has to be a centrist government. Both President Bush, President-elect Bush, and Vice President-elect Cheney understand that.
All right, thanks very much, NBC's Tim Russert. Let's go now to the chamber of the House of Representatives in the Texas State Capitol, the ornate chambers, and we'll hear from the Speaker, Pete Laney, who is a Democrat. He will be introducing the President-elect of the United States.
Welcome to the Texas House of Representatives chamber. It was about this time, about 6 years ago, that we were preparing to inaugurate a new governor in Texas. Many of us wondered what kind of leader he would be. We wondered how he would bring everybody together after a hard-fought election. Tonight, many people in our country are asking the same questions about George W. Bush. When he became governor, he reached out to members of the legislature of both parties. We didn't always agree on issues, but we found we could have policy differences without having gridlock. We could have debate without bitterness, and we could reach agreements and solve problems without sacrificing our principles. Above all, we learned that Governor Bush is a leader you can trust and respect. It is my honor to introduce to you a man who has earned my trust and respect, the Governor of Texas, my friend, the President-elect of the United States, the Honorable George W. Bush.
The moment for George W. Bush, the eldest son of a former president, the first father-son presidency since the Adams in the early stages of the 19th century.
Thank you all. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening, my fellow Americans. I appreciate so very much the opportunity to speak with you tonight. Mr. Speaker, Lieutenant Governor, friends, distinguished guests, our country has been through a long and trying period, with the outcome of the presidential election not finalized for longer than any of us could ever imagine. Vice President Gore and I put our hearts and hopes into our campaigns. We both gave it our all. We shared similar emotions, so I understand how difficult this moment must be for Vice President Gore and his family. He has a distinguished record of service to our country as a congressman, a senator, and a vice president. This evening, I received a gracious call from the vice president. We agreed to meet early next week in Washington, and we agreed to do our best to heal our country after this hard-fought contest. Tonight, I want to thank all the thousands of volunteers and campaign workers who worked so hard on my behalf. I also salute the Vice President and his supporters for waging a spirited campaign. And I thank him for a call that I know was difficult to make. Laura and I wish the Vice President and Senator Lieberman and their families the very best. I have a lot to be thankful for tonight. I'm thankful for America, and thankful that we are able to resolve our electoral differences in a peaceful way. I'm thankful to the American people for the great privilege of being able to serve as your next president. I want to thank my wife and our daughters for their love. Laura's active involvement as First Lady has made Texas a better place, and she will be a wonderful First Lady of America. I am proud to have Dick Cheney by my side, and America will be proud to have him as our next vice president. Tonight I chose to speak from the chamber of the Texas House of Representatives because it has been a home to bipartisan cooperation. Here in a place where Democrats have the majority, Republicans and Democrats have worked together to do what is right for the people we represent. We've had spirited disagreements, and in the end, we found constructive consensus. It is an experience I will always carry with me, an example I will always follow. I want to thank my friend House Speaker Pete Laney, a Democrat, who introduced me today. I want to thank the legislators from both political parties with whom I've worked. Across the hall in our Texas Capitol is the state Senate, and I cannot help but think of our mutual friend, the former Democrat Lieutenant Governor Bob Bullock. His love for Texas and his ability to work in a bipartisan way continue to be a model for all of us. The spirit of cooperation I have seen in this hall is what is needed in Washington, D.C. It is the challenge of our moment. After a difficult election, we must put politics behind us and work together to make the promise of America available for every one of our citizens. I'm optimistic that we can change the tone in Washington, D.C. I believe things happen for a reason, and I hope the long wait of the last 5 weeks will heighten a desire to move beyond the bitterness and partisanship of the recent past. Our nation must rise above a house divided. Americans share hopes and goals and values far more important than any political disagreements. Republicans want the best for our nation, and so do Democrats. Our votes may differ, but not our hopes. I know America wants reconciliation and unity. I know Americans want progress and we must seize this moment and deliver. Together, guided by a spirit of common sense, common courtesy, and common goals, we can unite and inspire the American citizens. Together, we will work to make all our public schools excellent, teaching every student of every background and every accent so that no child is left behind. Together, we will save Social Security and renew its promise of a secure retirement for generations to come. Together, we will strengthen Medicare and offer prescription drug coverage to all of our seniors. Together, we will give Americans the broad, fair, and fiscally responsible tax relief they deserve. Together, we will have a bipartisan foreign policy, true to our values and true to our friends. And we will have a military equal to every challenge and superior to every adversary. Together, we will address some of society's deepest problems, one person at a time, by encouraging and empowering the good hearts and good works of the American people. This is the essence of compassionate conservatism, and it will be a foundation of my administration. These priorities are not merely Republican concerns or Democratic concerns. They are American responsibilities. During the fall campaign, we differed about the details of these proposals, but there was remarkable consensus about the important issues before us: excellent schools, retirement and health security, tax relief, a strong military, a more civil society. We have discussed our differences. Now it is time to find common ground and build consensus to make America a beacon of opportunity in the 21st century. I'm optimistic this can happen. Our future demands it, and our history proves it. 200 years ago, in the election of 1800, America faced another close presidential election. A tie in the Electoral College put the outcome into the hands of Congress. After 6 days of voting and 36 ballots, the House of Representatives elected Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States. That election brought the first transfer of power from one party to another in our new democracy. Shortly after the election, Jefferson, in a letter titled Reconciliation and Reform, wrote this: "The steady character of our countrymen is a rock to which we may safely moor, unequivocal in principle, reasonable in manner. We should be able to hope to do a great deal of good to the cause of freedom and harmony." 200 years have only strengthened the steady character of America. And so, as we begin the work of healing our nation, tonight I call upon that character: respect for each other, respect for our differences, generosity of spirit, and a willingness to work hard and work together to solve any problem. I have something else to ask you, to ask every American. I ask for you to pray for this great nation. I ask for your prayers for leaders from both parties. I thank you for your prayers for me and my family. And I ask you to pray for Vice President Gore and his family. I have faith that with God's help, we as a nation will move forward together as one nation, indivisible. And together we will create an America that is open, so every citizen has access to the American dream. An America that is educated, so every child has the keys to realize that dream. And an America that is united in our diversity and our shared American values that are larger than race or party. I was not elected to serve one party, but to serve one nation. The President of the United States is the President of every single American, of every race and every background. Whether you voted for me or not, I will do my best to serve your interests, and I will work to earn your respect. I will be guided by President Jefferson's sense of purpose, to stand for principle, to be reasonable in manner, and above all, to do great good for the cause of freedom and harmony. The presidency is more than an honor. It is more than an office. It is a charge to keep, and I will give it my all. Thank you very much, and God bless America.
The state of Texas has one of its own back in the White House again for the third time in the last 50 years. Homegrown native-born Lyndon Johnson, of course. George W. Bush's father, George Bush, who moved to Texas after World War II and his Yale education. And this man, George W. Bush, who spent a good deal of his adult life in Texas. Although he went back east to private school, he returned immediately after Yale to Midland to become part of the oil business, and then, by his own admission, had some trouble finding himself over the next several years, tried several enterprises, ended up putting together a consortium of owners for the Texas Rangers baseball team, made about $10 million in the deal, ran for governor of Texas, defeated Ann Richards when no one gave him a chance. Now in his second term, ran for president of the United States, raised a bundle of money, and was, from the beginning, the odds-on favorite to win the Republican nomination. And then, after a spirited campaign against Al Gore, he eked out a victory in the Electoral College much closer than any of his political strategists had hoped or imagined that it might be. Let's go to NBC's Tim Russert right now. Tim, again, another graceful speech from the new president-elect talking about the issues specifically around which Democrats would have a hard time not uniting.
Absolutely, Tom. It was a presidential speech. He was sincere and forceful. It's quite interesting to me how both Al Gore and George W. Bush realized the significance and importance tonight for the country and for our history. They realized it was a moment bigger than they were, and they both stepped up in an extraordinary way, I think, have taken a very significant, extraordinary step in pulling the nation together. George W. Bush now has a unique opportunity between now and Inauguration Day on January 20th to try to garner some goodwill from the American people and create a honeymoon period, because he's going to need it with the very divided Congress. The last time the Republicans have controlled the White House, the House of Representatives, and the U.S. Senate was 1952. Under Dwight Eisenhower, it lasted just 2 years until 1954. But tonight was a very, very important moment for George W. Bush, and I think he gave an excellent speech.
Tim Russert, thank you very much. Now let's go to two senators, one from each side of the aisle, who joined us tonight, Senator John McCain of Arizona and Democratic Senator Bob Graham from the state of Florida. Let's begin with you, if we can, Senator McCain. I saw or heard nothing in this speech about campaign finance reform. It is your great passion, of course. Tim Russert talked about a honeymoon. Are you going to give the president-elect a honeymoon on campaign finance reform?
I want to work with the president-elect on this issue. We have discussed the fact that we need to work together on it. I hope we can. We need to take it up early, and I think it's very important that we do that before the Bush legislative agenda comes over to the Congress. We can get it out of the way in 2 or 3 weeks, and clearly we would do it in a bipartisan fashion. I think it would send a great signal to the country.
Are they trying to get you to delay your plans, however?
I have not been asked to do that. I know that there is significant resistance in some quarters in my party. I hope my party may have learned a lesson from the last election that money doesn't win elections.
And let me ask Senator Graham now. Here tonight, Texas Governor George Bush was talking about fixing Social Security and giving senior citizens the prescription drug coverage they deserve under Medicare. It'll be hard for Democrats to walk away from that idea.
It certainly will be, and it'll be hard for Americans to walk away from something that's so important to reforming Medicare into a program that not only deals with people after they become diseased, but helps to keep them well, and prescription drugs is a key to that. I believe that there is a very logical compromise to be found on both the issues of prescription drugs and a patient's Bill of Rights. They are answers which are going to be found inside the 40-yard line of the field of congressional politics, and I hope that's where the new president intends to play the game.
And Senator Graham, there is some talk, I know, on Capitol Hill of the Democrats laying out, in effect, for the next 2 years, letting the Republicans try to run this on their own so they can go after them hard in the off-year elections in 2002. Do you think that's a wise strategy?
That would be a horrendous strategy. Politics is not an end in itself. Politics is the means to effectively representing the will of the people through the democratic process. And if all we do is go from one election to the next, building up animosities and then splattering them out at the next election, we have not fulfilled our basic responsibility. We have an obligation to do what the people of America want, and I am confident that Republicans and Democrats will come together towards that common responsibility.
Senator McCain, the governor once again repeated tonight what he believes is the need for broad, uniform tax relief for this country. The economy is slowing. You were critical of the governor's tax plan when you were contesting with each other during the primaries. Do you think that he ought to have that high on his agenda?
I think there are some areas of tax cuts that we are in agreement on. Elimination of the marriage penalty, significant lifting of the so-called estate or death taxes, and I think there's other areas where we can work together on. I think that perhaps the governor might send over his whole tax package and then negotiate those areas in which we can agree and act on. I thought he gave an excellent speech. I think it was very inclusive, and I think he said all the right things. I think we've seen two truly outstanding speeches tonight that Americans can be proud of.
Senator Graham and Senator McCain, thank you very much. Final question for you, Senator McCain. Do you have a lot more ties like that in your collection?
Well, only at Christmas. Thank you for noticing, though. I hope it didn't blind you.
Thank you very much, Senator McCain.
Thank you.
Tom, I'd like to give both you and Senator McCain one of my ties.
All right, thank you very much. We'll take free ties anytime. No payola here. We'll be back with the historic test before this new president-elect and the Congress of the United States. Indeed, the test for all of us as we begin a new century right after this.
At Burlington Coat Factory, our prices are lower than department store sale prices. But now, during our big winter suit and sport coat sale, they're even lower. Save an extra $40 on beautifully tailored designer suits. Save an extra $30 on Famous Label Pure Wool suits. And save an extra $20 on 100% wool Famous Maker suits. Every suit and sport coat is on sale. So get to Burlington Coat Factory today. We're more